Now, tragic hero. So, Okinawa is the protagonist of the novel of the No Longer at Ease. He is a young man born in Aibo in the eastern Nigerian village of Umofia. এগুলো একটু মনে রাখতে হবে. He was well বলছি. He is the protagonist of the No Longer at Ease. Obi Okonowa is a young man born in Ibo in the eastern Nigerian village of Umofia. He was well educated and eventually sent to study law in England, a course of study he eventually changed into English. You know very well that he changed it into English. তোমাকে আমি আগেও বলেছি এখনো বলছি যে he changed it into English. Of course that doesn't matter, the subject what he changed. He stays in England for nearly 4 years, at times longing for the warm weather at home and all the other nostalgic qualities his memory supplies him during long winters abroad. Nevertheless, his arrival is less than what he has expected. Because he is educated, he is given a European post and he works in an office whose ethics he finds repulsive. He stands firmly against the bribery that goes on and is opposed to his boss, a very old white and English colonial man named Mr. Green. Obi finds himself in a constant battle between traditions of the world into which he was born, that of the village and his traditional African roots, represented by the European Progressive Union and the conventions of a changing world. Obi finds himself at the beginning of a generation of change. He is caught between two worlds. He is unable to marry the woman that he loves because she is considered as an outcast in the society of theirs. He claims to want to marry her anyway because by the time he has children, the world will have changed and it will not matter. Just as it does not matter now that his father is a convert to Christianity, a conversion that was once quite scandalous in Nigeria. Still, Obi loses his fiancée, his mother, and he finds himself in serious debt throughout the course of the novel. He must pay back his scholarship loan and is responsible for sending money home. Eventually, Obi breaks under all of this pressure and gives in to the bribery he had stood against so idealistically, but he does not give in without guilt. So at the end, he even claims to be finished with bribery right before he's caught. Because we know he's caught in the end. Somehow it is too late, and his situation, his position of being caught between two positions, two shifting worlds, becomes almost impossible. So Obi's birth name is Obiajulu, Obiajulu, which means the mind at last is at rest. And this naming is a looming irony, considering the title of the novel and the Obi's predicament. Obi is still at ease in both of his cultural experiences. He lies in the middle, a difficult place. Obi Okonowa, the central character in No Longer at Ease, is a typical educated Nigerian young man who, to begin with, wanted to cleanse Nigeria of its evils. He was a brilliant student whose kith and kin pool in their hard earned money to send him to England for further studies in accordance with the usual practice. In return, what happens? They expect him to bring honor and prosperity to their village. You know, তখন থেকে দিবি একটা ওষুধ বার করে রেখেছি আর একটা ওষুধ বের চলে আসে হুম But much to his consternation, Obi notices right from the time he lands in Nigeria that his country is no longer the Nigeria of his dreams, but it has already advanced in corrupt practices such as bribe taking. Though his in, though his intentions are really good, Obi fails to carry them out in his real life because of the negative change in values. While courage and inflexibility rule the society of Okunwa, that his grandfather Obi is a typical product of a modern grandfather. Hmm? Just a minute. One of the medicine packet বাইরে আছে আর একটা থেকে ভেতর থেকে বার করতে হবে হ্যাঁ ওই দুটো ওষুধই বাকি ওই যে একটা নামটা তো মনে নেই দেখ বাড়ি একটা প্যাকেট রয়েছে আর আরেকটা ছোট্ট প্যাকেটের মধ্যে OB is a typical product of a modern era that mixes motives and values, a miserable amalgam, the offshoot of a weak hybrid culture. Thus, the strength of the novel does not lie in characterization, but in its brilliant description and analysis of situations and conflicts. Obi often ponders over the ill-advised traditions of his country, such as paying bride price, the Osu practice, and also undermining of native values by the newly ushered in material values like the English language and the Western way of life. How is the car behaving as Achivi observed? The man who conquered us and colonized us also brought his language and his administration and his style of life and everything. These are some of the problems and some of the facts of existence. Obi is a sensible young man who could question the unjust authority of Mr. Green, his English boss. He was stable enough to thwart the practice of accepting bribes in his personal life and was modest enough not to fall for the vanities usually associated with a foreign return. We fall, we all fall in vanity. I said, just wait 2 minutes, আমার ওষুধটা খেয়ে নিয়েছে So we find that Obi is a sensible young man who could question the unjust authority of Mr. Green, the English boss. He was stable enough to thwart the practice of accepting bribes in his personal life and was modest enough to fall for the vanities usually associated with a foreign return. Yet Obi fails ultimately because, on the one hand, unlike his heroic grandfather Okunoa, he was not decisive enough in his action, and on the other, he lived at a time when an individual is rendered impotent to be firm about anything in life, either in personal affairs such as marriage or in public life where he cannot impose freedom of his will. Here lies the crisis of his life. So you call him a tragic hero. It is of this crisis one of the points. On the domestic front, Obi testifies to the Aibo adage. What does it say? Mother is supreme. He holds his mother in high regard and is constantly aware of her sacrificing nature. Yet her vehement disapproval of his intended marriage to Clara, an Osu girl, has him in shocked dismay. It is when Obi is forced to choose between his mother and Clara that he falls prey to emotional turmoil and loses his moral balance and his ideals start disintegrating after returning from the village to Lagos, which is equanimity in sheds. So equanimity is always there when you return from a foreign land, isn't it? You feel that it is your duty that you must do something for your own country, for your own area. So Obi succumbs to the later events. He gets caught red handed while accepting a bribe and is forced to face trial in a court of justice. Yet Obi is arguably strong. To cite few instances, his last minute decision to prevent Clara from a proposed abortion and his belated idea to marry her, his reluctance and willingness to recommend those candidates who fall short of the minimum qualification, as it happens today. Whether you are qualified or not, if you're in a party, you get a chance in the job, and then you get caught and everything is taken away from you. Same thing happens to Obi, to merit a scholarship, and finally the betrayal of treacherous tears on being called a young man of education and promise in the court of by the judge. The judge observes, how can a young man of education and promise be so corrupted? Obi Okunwa, the 20th century Magus, when he journeys home, has certain definite ideas regarding his future. What he fails to foresee, however, is to find himself in the slope of instability, wherein a brilliant man like him would stand confounded. So he is unable to acknowledge faith in the old dispensation, the norms of which are in throes of panic caused by the advent of the alien people clutching their gods. So these people of Nigeria, they believe in gods. So when he has become corrupt, naturally he's a man to be questioned with. He's equally restive in the milieu of urban Lagos because he's unable to conform to the ideas of the West. In a society which is predominantly materialistic, he is forced to follow such modes of living as maintaining a chauffeur driven car, which he has to do because he has grown in status, upkeep of a modern home, luxury of frequenting nightclubs, paying taxes besides expenses, involving the education of his brothers and sisters, and contributing to the family finances. So the life and career of Obi Okonowa proved that the advent of white civilization loosed blood-dimmed tide of anarchy and African life. It did in our life also. We are talking about African life today. No wonder people like Obi, who cannot put up with the disillusioning present and would be glad to another death, disillusioned with the native life, which is still in the vice like grip of outdated ideas, and the futility, uselessness of Western education that proved ineffectual in closing the gulf of difference between caste and outcast. This predicament of Obi and his likes is poignantly voiced in Okanara's poem, which we find it. When at daybreak at riverside, I hear of jungle drums, then I hear a wailing piano solo speaking of complex waves. That is their poem, the poem of these tribal people. So the common struggle of educated Africans who stand confounded between acceptance and rejection is evocatively portrayed in the tone character of Obi Okunwa. He feels terrible after accepting his first bribe, but he is not able to fight the practice. He could not find for himself a balanced scale of values with the help of which he would have retained his integrity. In modern Nigerian society, unlike in the tribal communities, the sharing of any benefit took place only among the top people. So as a result, as it happens in our system also, as a result, everyone tries to get to the top through the disreputable means of offering bribes. What does and what do our ministers do? The same thing. In Nigeria, the government was they, considered as they. Tahader Sarkar. It had nothing to do with you or me. It was an alien institution, and the people's business was to get much from it as they could do without getting into trouble. So, an interesting twist in the matter is that it may cause more trouble by refusing a bribe than by accepting it. So, you see, in our country also, it is very difficult to refuse bribe because the people would call you mad, madness set into you. This one evil pays way to another. Even a good custom could outlive its purpose and value and thus become corrupt, a symbol of anarchy in a different situation. So the offering of kola nut that signified politeness and warmth towards the visitor in the traditional society, for instance, they call it kola nut, such type of bribes, is equal to the offering of bribe outside the traditional context or obi being referred to as the only palm fruit of the village. Palm fruit is the best man, the best person, educated, sent abroad by his own men, educated and then returned to his own place. So the village code of conduct has been violated, but a more embracing and a bigger one has not been found. While old values like courage and valor are no longer valid, the educated natives' conditions, like that of Obi, is charged with tragic undertones and is worse than that of his brothers in the bush. Achebe comments. His abortive effort at education and culture, though leaving him totally unredeemed and unregenerated, had nonetheless done something to him. It had deprived him of his links with his own people, with whom he no longer even understood and who certainly wanted none of his dissatisfaction or pretension. Nobody wants to displease the MPs and MLAs who are involved in our country also in corruption. Where then is the solution for the likes of Obi, whom we see by the dozens in modern societies? Everywhere in every country around the world, it is the same tale being retold again and again. So, our great philosopher, Indian philosopher Dr. S. Radhakrishnan says, life is like a game of bridge. The players are dealt cards unknown to them, but they can play the game well or badly. A skillful player may have a bad deal and yet win the game, whereas a bad player may get a good and yet make a mess of it. People like Obi Okinawa who escape suffering crisis in the soul by making right choices like good bridge players. Their timely decision in exercising control and freedom to expand according to the changing times and needs of an ever growing society can help them get out of the iron hold of dogmas and retain their equanimity. Even if they try to be good, if Obi tries to be good, he cannot be good because the system would not allow him to be good. So the protagonist of No Longer at Ease, Obi Okonowa, is the grandson of the first novel's protagonist, Okonkwa. এই নামগুলো একটু মনে রাখতে হবে. The setting has shifted to nature. Okonko, Okwonko. এই ভুলগুলো করো না বাবা, তাহলে একদম শেষ হয়ে যাবে. So, the Okonko is his grandfather. The setting has shifted two generations in time and 500 miles away from Okonko's fictional Ibo. Okonko, O K Ko, Ko, Ko. ঠিক আছে, ও এইসব নামেতে you can spell it because it's a uh, actually proper name of different country, হ্যাঁ, এটা আমাদের জানার কথা না, তবু আমরা শিখছি. We have to learn it because the story has to be retold. So don't worry about that. Worry about the answer. হ্যাঁ, But don't for Okonko, don't write Okokoko, don't write like that. So the setting is shifted 2 generations in time, and 500 miles away from Okonko's fictional Ibo village of Umofia to Lagos, Nigeria. It is third-person narrator focused mainly from Obi unfolds the story in chronological order after the opening chapter. Or to put it another way, the entire narrative is one long flashback of after the opening. The first section of the first chapter takes the reader inside the Lagos courtroom, where Obi is on trial for bribery. And the third section is the sense, where his Ibo kinsmen are holding an emergency meeting of the Umofia Progressive Union to discuss their position on supporting their prodigal son. Why prodigal son? Because they sold him everything and sent him abroad. The prodigal son parable. You know it everything. After spending everything, he returns home. But that time he has spent everything that was with him, that he had from the family. So where we then fade back to the Obi Okono, the apprenticeship. Obi has book. He has been college educated and having been sent to England on a scholarship loan, scraped together by the poor of town folks as a part of the progressive union who provided the money to him to go abroad for studies. They attempt to give their kinsmen sons and daughter a chance for a future in the ever-changing society. Obi is outspoken and headstrong. Like his grandfather's attention is made to this by a tribal elder when he returns to his rural village. In a hometown boy makes sort of a welcome feast in a doubly ironic application of biblical scriptures. So you see, these things are the things that has to be remembered and kept in mind. Again and again, the same thing comes. So attention is made to this by a tribal elder when he returns to his rural village. In a hometown boy makes good sort of welcome feast. In a doubly classical, ironic application of biblical scripture that the Ibo repeats as the adherence to the old ways, while also potent for later events. So one of the characters would say his name is Odogu, Odogwu, Odogu. Remark, remark him, said Odogu. He's Hugo Ogifi Ogunko, Ogufi Ogunko, Oguefi Ogunko, Ogwonko. Who says Odogu says, come back. He's uh, another kind of character. He's Okonko Kepom Kiwom exact perfect. Kepom Kiwom Kpom Kwem means exact perfect. So he is another what you call a cheat. After returning from abroad, Okono has been declared a dishonest man. So was this man Ogufu Ogunko, who did it, said Odugu. I tell you, this is Okonko as it was in the beginning, so it will be in the end. That is what is your religion tells us. So always there will be, in whatever way you try to reform everything and make everything all right, it will never be possible because things will not let it happen and make it all okay. He has widened his cultural perspective, and with it, he has developed ideas about how to improve the system of civil advancement. In his Nigeria that is driven by bribery. So Nigeria, it is said, is a country of bribery where bribery is very rampant and common. That is what has been said over here. So the usual, the novel draws out the complexity of Nigeria's state of flux morally, spiritually, and psychologically. More importantly, Achebe manages keep authorial distance in a calm, wise voice. This is a very common sight everywhere, anywhere in the world. Such things happen when you go with power. All sorts of corruption sets in. His ideals are tested in a city that his Igbo kinsmen have warned him hold temptations too great for him. Achebe does a skillful job of balancing our perspective of the opposing cultural forces at play, examining the very human consequences at the intersection when two cultures world views misunderstand each other. As in the earlier novel, wrestling is associated subtextually with confrontation on the deeper level. You have not read them. There are two other novels also of struggling with old ways. Wrestling is a game there. Obi is seen by his clansman as challenging his chi, chi, chi. Chi is his personal gods, challenging chi, personal gods, to personal combat. His clan's forbearance with him is tested. It's important to remember the blood ties here. He's under obligations to meet the expectations as their bright hope. At one point, they call him a beast of no nation. Obi's moral courage, his dignity of holding to his ideals, is challenged by choices he is finally forced to make. He bears the shame and guilt of a betrayer, but he cannot be only be a betrayer of either his ideals or his clan tradition. So such people will naturally be called betrayer. Yeah. So you can say that it is a moment of epiphany. Obi reflects on his mother and father and compares his mother as a woman who got things done to his father. So, who is a man of thought? These thoughts seemed to release his spirit. He no longer felt guilt. He too had died. His father also, who was involved in such type of a practice. So beyond death, there are no ideals and no humbug, only reality. When death occurs, that time you don't say that that man is this man or that man or a corrupted person like Onubroto Mondol. If he dies, he is dead,
Okay.
and with him everything dies. So that is what happens. The impatient idealist says, "Give me a place to stand, and I shall move the earth." But such a place does not exist. We all stand on the earth itself and go with her at her pace. What I took away a new appreciation for an author and his culture struggle. So you see that what we see is the reality of the situation, isn't it? That is what we come across in our day-to-day life. We cannot disrespect it or disown it or say, no, 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 such things do not happen with men who have gained power, and that too, foreign learned man. So we have our MPs, that female MP from Krishnanagar. She has studied in foreign country because her father had enough money to send her there, give her the lesson. And when she returns, she betrays the country by revealing the code, parliamentary code to enter the parliament. And then she says, no, no, I've done the right thing, nothing wrong has been done by me. That is in every country. So in our state, what we see today is also in Okono. And remember that very well. So here it ends.